The Hall of Stars had never been silent before. It was the greatest chamber in the entire empire, wide as a valley, bright as a newborn sun, and tall enough that echoes had their own echoes. On most days, the hall shook with noise. Nobles arguing about trade routes, generals bragging about battlefield victories, young diplomats whispering rumors behind jeweled fans. But on this morning, as Princess walked slowly toward the center, even the air seemed to freeze in place. She looked smaller than usual, wrapped in a soft silver cloak that shimmered each time she moved. Her people always admired how calm she looked in public, but today her calmness came from something deeper, something heavier. Each step carried both fear and courage, mixed like two rivers that met and refused to separate. No one spoke. Not even the floating lantern drones dared hum. They drifted above her, dimming their lights as if afraid they might interrupt. Reached the center of the hall and stopped. The platform beneath her feet rose gently, lifting her just high enough for every noble, commander, and advisor to see her face clearly. She could feel thousands of eyes studying her, some filled with respect, some filled with suspicion, and some with quiet curiosity. She knew what they expected. They thought she would announce a political decision or a health concern. They thought she would apologize for her recent disappearance. They thought she would reassure them that nothing unusual was happening. They were wrong. She took a slow breath. Her heartbeat felt like a drum in her ears. She placed her hand on her abdomen, letting her fingers rest there gently, protectively. The tiny life inside her responded with a soft warmth, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. "My people," she began, her voice calm but trembling at the edges. "I have asked you all to gather today because I carry news that cannot remain hidden." The nobles leaned forward. The commanders held their breath. The hall seemed to shrink, pulling every soul closer to her words. Eyes softened. She remembered the lonely nights on Seven, the frozen moon where her ship crashed. She remembered the human man who had found her walker, who carried her through the cold without asking who she was. She remembered how he stayed beside her during long nights, fixing her damaged ship while telling stories about Earth's skis. She remembered how he looked at her not as royalty, not as an alien, but simply as someone who needed help. His kindness had changed her. His honesty had rooted itself inside her heart. Her memories steadied her now. She let her hand press gently on her stomach once more. "I carry a child," she said. The hall stiffened instantly. No cheers, no gasps, only the tense sound of thousands of minds trying to understand her words. But she wasn't finished. "And the father," she paused. Her eyes did not drop. She refused to show shame. She looked straight into the circle of nobles, the ones who feared change the most. "The father is human." There it was. The revelation dropped into the hall like a stone into still water, quiet at first, then spreading shock in every direction. The High Lord's jaw fell open. The royal medics blinked as if their eyes had betrayed them. Young diplomats looked at one another as if asking silently whether they heard correctly. Then the silence broke almost violently. A wave of whispers rolled across the hall. Some nobles covered their mouths in disbelief. Others pointed at her, muttering that it must be a joke or a misunderstanding. The commander's expressions hardened instantly. Humans were allies but not equals in the Empire's eyes. A few voices rose louder. "A human, impossible. This threatens the royal bloodline. She must be confused. No hybrid child can survive." Stood still, refusing to bow her head. Her cloak rustled lightly as the whispers grew sharper. One councilwoman stepped forward, her face pale with shock. "Princess, do you understand what you are saying? A child with human heritage would be unprecedented. It would change the entire empire." Held her ground. "Yes," she said softly, "I understand." Another noble shouted, "This is dishonor, this is chaos." But she didn't flinch. "My child is not chaos," she said. "My child is life." Her voice carried strength now, quiet but unbreakable. The hall did not calm. If anything, it grew louder, as if every hidden fear in the empire had awakened at once. Some shouted she should step down. Others demanded testing. A few, very few, simply watched her with wide, uncertain eyes. Lifted her chin. "I will not hide," she said. "Not my truth, not my child." The hall, for a brief moment, fell silent again. A storm had begun. Chaos spread through the hall of stars like lightning across a clear sky. The moment Princess finished speaking, the nobles burst into arguments so loud the lantern drones flickered in confusion. The grand chamber, usually a symbol of order, had turned into a storm of raised voices, trembling outrage and raw disbelief. High Lord, the oldest and most influential among them, struck the marble floor with his tall silver staff. The crack echoed like thunder. "A human!" he shouted, his voice sharp enough to slice through the noise. "Princess, have you lost your sense of duty?" A wave of agreement swept the hall. Humans are fragile. Humans are impulsive. Humans are not fit to mix with our royal blood. Stood still in the center, surrounded by a storm that wanted to swallow her. Her silver cloak fluttered with each wave of anger. Despite the echo of hateful words, she did not let her gaze drop. The accusations came like arrows. "This will ruin our alliances. This will shake the people's trust. This child will be a symbol of weakness." The words stung, but she had endured worse. The loneliness after her crash on Seven had nearly broken her. The cold nights had made her question everything. But then, quiet, kind, stubborn, had lifted her from the icy ground and carried her into the warmth of his small shelter. He had spoken softly as he cleaned her wounds, unsure if she even understood his language. His warmth had melted her fear long before her ship was repaired. She remembered him now, and the memory steadied her. Still, the council continued. One commander stepped closer, armor shining under the lantern light. "Princess, you must explain how this happened. Why would you allow a human to be so close? You were on a diplomatic mission, not a personal one." Met his eyes, "Saved my life. Without him, I would not be standing here." "And this child," someone shouted from the crowd. Felt her heartbeat tighten. "This child is part of me, and part of a man who showed me more compassion than some here ever have." The hall erupted again. Words she couldn't hear mixed with words she wished she hadn't heard. The nobles were no longer discussing. Now they were attacking. Their fear had turned into anger, and their anger was now reaching for her like claws. High Lord raised his hands to silence them. "Princess, your duty is to the Empire. Your bloodline is sacred. A hybrid child, if such a thing is even possible, breaks every ancient law." The hall quieted. Everyone leaned forward. Even the air seemed to wait. Knew this moment would come. She had practiced her answer many times in her mind, but still her throat tightened. "I did not plan for this," she said honestly. "But life does not follow our rules. It follows truth. And my truth is that I carry a child who deserves to exist." A low murmur moved across the hall. Confusion, discomfort, disbelief. Narrowed his eyes. "A child with human blood will confuse the people. They may see it as a threat, as a sign of diluted strength. What do you say to that?" Stepped forward. Her hand moved again to her abdomen, a soft protective gesture she didn't even realize she was making. "Strength is not in purity," she said. "Strength is in compassion, in unity, in courage." The words shook the room, not because they were loud, but because they held something the nobles were not ready for, truth stripped of fear. A younger diplomat spoke next. "Princess, even if what you say is noble, the law demands investigation. The council cannot accept such a claim without verification. If you truly carry a hybrid child, prove it." Nodded. She had expected this too. "Then test me," she said calmly. "I have nothing to hide." Gasps rippled across the hall. Some nobles exchanged uneasy looks. Others whispered that she was either foolish or too brave. But the decision had been made. The royal medic stepped forward slowly, his eyes uncertain. "Princess, such tests require time, and the council must supervise." "I understand," said softly. High Lord tapped his staff once more. "Until verification is complete, you will be confined to the palace medical wing. You may not leave. You may not speak to anyone outside the royal circle." The order hit the hall like a stone. Felt fear rise in her chest, but she swallowed it. For her child, she would face confinement, shame, and judgment. She would face all of it without bending. "I will go," she said. As the guards approached to escort her, the nobles watched her with a mix of fear, anger, and wonder. The storm had not ended. It had only begun. The Chamber of Judgment was a room unlike any other in the empire. Cold stone walls stretched high into darkness, and the air seemed to hum with the weight of centuries of law and tradition. Light fell through narrow slits in the ceiling, casting long, sharp shadows on the polished floor. For Princess, entering the chamber felt like stepping into a world that had no mercy, no warmth, no understanding, only authority. She walked alone. No guards, no attendants, no friends. Her silver cloak shimmered faintly, and the soft sound of her boots echoed against the stone. Every step reminded her that she was being watched by the people who judged life, love, and loyalty. The doors closed behind her with a heavy thud, sealing her in with the council that had already decided her fate in their minds. High Lord rose from his throne-like chair at the head of the chamber. "Princess," he said, voice low and sharp, "you have presented the council with an unprecedented claim, a child with human blood. Do you understand what this means? Do you understand the consequences?" Lips pressed into a thin line. "I understand," she said. Her hand instinctively moved to her abdomen, gentle but protective. "And I accept them." A councilwoman leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You have disrupted the empire. You have disregarded centuries of law. You claim this child will bring unity, but the reality is chaos." "Is it chaos to save a life?" asked softly. Her voice carried through the hall, steady and clear. "Or is it chaos to deny it?" The room fell silent for a moment. Some members shifted uncomfortably, but most remained rigid, their faces masks of authority. The council had power, yes, but had courage. And that courage was invisible yet heavier than any stone in the chamber. The imperial medic stepped forward, a small shimmering device in hand. "Princess, the council requires proof. We must confirm your claim before making any decisions. Science cannot ignore law, biology must be." Nodded. "Then test me, examine me, see the truth for yourself, I will not hide it." The medic hesitated. Even he sensed the tension in the room. To verify the child meant touching a part of life that the Empire had never allowed outsiders, never even imagined. But he activated the device. A holographic projection rose from the floor, spinning lightly in the air. Lights danced along silhouette, scanning gently but precisely. The council watched, leaning forward, whispers quiet but urgent. High Lord's jaw tightened. If this hybrid is real, it could challenge every law, every tradition we have upheld. Every choice we make from this moment onward could be questioned. His chest tightened with emotion. She felt fear, yes, but stronger than fear was determination. She thought of how he had carried her through cold nights on a lifeless moon, how he had treated her wounds with care, how he had spoken to her as an equal, not as a princess or a prize. His memory warmed her. She drew strength from it. The medic's voice broke the silence. "It is true. The fetus contains human DNA. It is stable. No abnormalities detected. This child is viable." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some council members recoiled. Others whispered frantically to each other. High Lord's hand trembled slightly as he rested it on his staff. This was more than unprecedented. This was history in motion. A young diplomat spoke, voice trembling. "If what you say is true, Princess, this child is not only real, but proof of something no law has prepared for. It cannot be ignored. What do we do?" Lifted her head. We choose life, we choose compassion, we choose truth. The council murmured among themselves. Some wanted to silence her, some wanted to discredit the proof, and some, very quietly, began to consider her words. Could courage outweigh centuries of law? Could compassion outweigh fear? Could life itself be stronger than rules etched in stone? High Lord finally spoke, voice cold but measured. Until a final decision is made, Princess, you will remain confined. You will not leave the chamber. You will not see anyone outside this room without council approval. Shoulders stiffened, but she did not bow. I will stay, she said, for my child, for truth, for the life that must be recognized. As the guard stepped forward to escort her to the medical wing, whispers followed her. Some feared her defiance. Some admired it quietly, but the seed of change had been planted. Outside the chamber, the Empire waited, unaware that this young princess, carrying an impossible life, was about to shake the foundation of everything they had believed. And inside felt a quiet flame burning in her chest, a mixture of fear, hope, and unyielding courage. The storm had begun. The city outside the palace remained calm in the morning light, unaware of the storm brewing inside the walls. But far beyond the Empire's border, a small, battered human ship cut through the void like a single bright star in endless darkness. Walker had never flown such a long distance before. He was not a soldier, not a diplomat, not a warrior. He was an engineer, a man of quiet hands and careful heart. Yet now, across thousands of kilometers and countless dangers, he carried only one purpose: to be with Princess. The Empire's defense grid should have detected him instantly. Human ships were rare, almost mythical in this sector, and the outer scanners would normally trigger alarms that brought fleets racing to intercept. But had spent months studying the Empire's protocols, learning their patterns and calculating risks. Every system he bypassed was a silent prayer. Every move was precise, measured, human. He had no weapons, no tricks, only determination and the love he refused to name aloud until he reached her. As he approached the capital, the planetary shields glimmered faintly under the sun, and distant alarm sirens began to echo. Defense drones activated, scanning, locking, preparing for orders. Ship shook slightly from the magnetic currents, but he did not falter. He had promised himself he would reach her, and nothing, no law, no cannon, no fear, would stop him. Inside the palace, stood at the window of the medical wing, watching the city below. She had been confined for days, her only visitors the council members and the royal medics. Every hour the anticipation and fear grew inside her like a tide she could not stop. And then, through the faint shimmer of the morning sun, she saw it. A single ship, small, unusual, bright against the sky. Her heart skipped. Recognition hit her before thought could catch up. She whispered, pressing her hand against the glass. It felt like the first warmth she had felt in weeks. Outside, the city's defense drones began to activate fully. Cannons and energy nets aimed at the approaching ship. Officers shouted orders, but something in his calm, deliberate movement slowed the panic. He did not fight, did not threaten. He merely pressed forward, trusting in the bond that had started in silence on a frozen moon, far from any empire. In the hall outside the medical wing's presence was noticed by the guards. Her eyes widened as she saw the figure in the distance, stepping out from the ship's small hatch. His armor was patched, worn, and unremarkable, but his stance, upright and steady, radiated certainty. He raised his hands, not in surrender, not in attack, but in a gesture of peace. "I am here for," his voice carried faintly over the air, but the guards understood. Some of them hesitated. No human had ever dared approach the capital like this. Some whispered nervously to one another. Others raised blasters, fingers trembling on triggers, but did not move backward. He did not shout. He only stood calm, unwavering, a human refusing to retreat from impossibility. Inside, felt tears prick her eyes. For weeks she had felt alone, watched, judged. And now there he was, not a hero of war, not a diplomat demanding favor, but a man who had crossed stars for her, carrying only hope and honesty. She pressed her hand harder against the glass, willing the energy field to part, willing him to reach her. The crowd below had gathered, unsure why the ship had come, unsure whether to cheer or call for alarms. Some nobles whispered that this could be a trap. Soldiers tightened their grips, yet something in its calmness forced them to pause. There was no aggression, no threat, only presence, human courage in its simplest, most powerful form. "Princess," said again, this time louder, "I come not to fight, not to demand, only to stand by you." His heart surged. The words reached her like a tide, washing away weeks of fear and loneliness. She felt hope, wild, fragile, and unstoppable, bloom inside her chest. For the first time since her confession, she smiled softly. She pressed her forehead to the glass, imagining his hand reaching hers. The high-ranking guards exchanged glances. The crowd outside murmured, sensing something impossible, extraordinary, and profoundly human. A quiet understanding began to spread. The human was not an enemy, not a manipulator, not a threat. He was a witness of truth, a protector of life. The palace council had not expected this. The quiet man from another world, weak in appearance but strong in purpose, had arrived to challenge centuries of fear, and for the first time felt the possibility of more than survival. She felt the possibility of love, courage, and a child who could change everything. She whispered again, "You came." Lifted his gaze toward the tower. "I promised," he said simply. "I will not leave you, not now, not ever." The air between them seemed to shimmer, charged with unspoken vows. Outside, alarms began to sound louder, orders were shouted, but inside her heart knew. The storm had found its calm. The human had arrived, and nothing, no empire, no council, no fear, could undo what had begun here. The courtyard outside the palace had become a place of tension and whispers. Thousands of citizens, nobles, and soldiers had gathered after spotting the small human ship. Some were curious, some fearful, and some silently cheering. But the imperial commander was neither curious nor silent. He was furious. He stepped forward, armor clinking, voice like steel. "You human," he shouted, "you have crossed forbidden space. You will be detained immediately." Walker did not flinch. He looked at the commander with calm eyes, hands raised in peaceful surrender. "I expected as much," he said softly, "but I will not leave her side." The commander bellowed orders to his soldiers. They stepped forward, weapons raised, their expressions a mixture of fear and obedience, but stood still, his gaze steady on its tower. Every word, every breath carried a human certainty that unnerved them. Pressed her hands against the energy barrier of the tower, her silver cloak fluttering in the morning wind. "Don't let them take him," she cried. Her voice carried across the courtyard, and even the soldiers paused for a heartbeat, unsure how to respond. Took a slow step forward. "You may detain me," he said quietly, "but I will not abandon her. I came for the princess, for the child, nothing else matters." The commander's brow furrowed. He was used to fear controlling those around him, to obedience dictating outcomes. But here was a human, a simple man, unarmed, defiant in his calmness, challenging his authority. "Do you expect us to trust you?" the commander demanded. His gaze did not waver. "No," he said honestly. "I do not ask for trust, I only ask that you see the truth. I am not here as a threat, I am here because she needs protection, that is all." The crowd was silent now, watching, listening, holding its breath. Humans had always been distant, almost stories from old records, weak, unpredictable, fleeting. But here was one, standing steady under pressure, unafraid of the might of an empire. Whispers began to ripple through the gathered citizens. "He is not like them," someone murmured. "He does not fear her, he does not demand anything." A mother holding a small child whispered, "He could be one of us." The commander, sensing the shift in the crowd, hesitated. His soldiers glanced at each other nervously, unsure if they could act without causing outrage. The authority he wielded felt fragile now, weakened by something he could not name. Stepped closer, closer to the energy barrier that separated him from. I take responsibility, he said, voice soft but firm. For her, for our child, I will not run and I will not leave. Felt warmth rush through her chest. She had been confined, judged, and silenced for days, but in this moment the courage of a human she trusted reminded her of what she had always known, that life was stronger than fear, stronger than law, stronger than hatred. The commander's hand trembled slightly as he raised it, signaling the soldiers to hold. You, you will be taken to a holding hall, he said finally, his voice betraying uncertainty. Not a cell. You will remain under supervision. Nodded, he allowed the soldiers to guide him without struggle. Before he was led away, his eyes met and he smiled, a small, tired, unwavering smile. It said everything. I am here. I am with you. I will not leave. The crowd exhaled collectively, as if a tension they hadn't known had built for years had finally been released. Some citizens clapped softly. Others cheered quietly. Even the soldiers, trained for obedience, could not hide their admiration. Touched the glass barrier one last time before she was pulled back into the tower. She whispered, "You are my strength," and felt the warmth of hope bloom inside her chest. From the crowd below, voices began to rise, not in rebellion, not yet, but in acknowledgement of something extraordinary. One by one, whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into shouts, and shouts into quiet chants of solidarity. The human had not only crossed the stars to reach her, he had also crossed the walls of prejudice, fear, and authority. And in that moment, realized something powerful. The Empire was beginning to see a truth it had long refused to acknowledge. Courage, compassion, and love could not be stopped by laws, shields, or threats. They moved in ways the strongest armies could never predict. Disappeared from view, escorted into the holding hall, but his presence lingered like a flame. And pressed her hand again to her abdomen, feeling the tiny life inside her, the child who had already begun to change everything. The Empire thought it had power, but the human and the princess had something far stronger: truth, courage, and an unbreakable bond. The storm was far from over, but a shift had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. News of Walker's arrival spread across the capital like a wildfire that could not be controlled. Citizens whispered in marketplaces, sentries paused mid-step to talk quietly to each other, and even young nobles in their towers peered through telescopes to confirm what they had heard. A human had crossed the stars, entered the Empire's space, and stood beside the princess. Many of them were confused. Humans were rarely seen in the Empire's heart, and most believed them to be weak, fragile, or foolish. But here was one, calm, courageous, and unwavering. And he was not alone. He was the father of the princess's child. Word reached mothers and fathers first. They listened to the story of kindness, courage, and care, the human who had saved the princess when no one else could. And slowly, their fear began to turn into admiration. If he could cross the stars for her, one mother whispered to her child, perhaps humans are stronger than we believed. Workers and scholars discussed the event in quiet corners, debating whether tradition should bend for truth. Some elders shook their heads, unwilling to accept change. Others, quietly, felt a stirring in their hearts, a recognition that life sometimes demanded choices beyond law or fear. In the palace, remained confined, though her spirit was not broken. She spent hours looking out from the tower window, watching the distant lights of the city flicker as citizens gathered in small groups. The whispers of support grew louder each day. Messages of encouragement reached her through loyal aides, cautious but heartfelt. Even some council members, hesitant at first, began to question the wisdom of strict judgment. Then came the day when the council called her to the central chamber once more. The tension in the air was thick, yet entered with her head held high. She had become stronger in confinement, her resolve deepened by the human who had crossed the impossible distance to stand with her. "You have brought unrest to the Empire," High Lord said, voice heavy. "You flaunt the law and the people grow restless. Do you not see what you are risking?" "I see," replied softly. that the people desire truth and life and courage more than they fear the law. My child will be born into an empire that must choose hope over fear." Her words caused a stir. Some council members exchanged uneasy glances. Others were silent, unsure how to respond. Evan's face showed the slightest flicker of doubt, a crack in the armor of centuries-old certainty. Then the doors opened. Walker was escorted into the chamber, not as a prisoner, but as a guest under supervision. The sight of him standing beside the princess shifted the room's energy. His quiet, calm presence reminded everyone that courage and honor were not bound by species or title. "I do not seek power," said. His voice was steady, kind, and deliberate. "I only seek to protect her and our child. I am here because I must be, not because I want reward or glory." The council fell silent again. Some could not meet his gaze. Some whispered among themselves, realizing that the human's honesty carried more weight than centuries of law, stepped forward. "You fear this child will divide the empire," she said, "but it will unite us. Not because it is human, not because it is royal, but because it represents life, courage, and the choice to act with compassion." Outside the palace, the citizens had begun to gather in larger numbers. Mothers carried lanterns, fathers held children's hands, and ordinary workers joined silently in support. The message had spread. The princess and the human had fear, and in doing so, they had inspired the people. The chants began softly at first, almost hesitant, but soon they grew louder. "We support life, we support courage, we support the child." The voices carried through streets, echoing into courtyards, reaching even the chamber where the council deliberated. For the first time, the council realized that authority alone could not hold the empire in place. Tradition could not outweigh the people's will. And in the center of it all and stood together, symbols of hope, unyielding in the face of centuries of fear. High Lord cleared his throat. His voice was measured, quieter than usual. Perhaps there is wisdom in courage and compassion. Perhaps we have underestimated the power of truth." His heart swelled, but she remained composed. She looked at and he returned her gaze with a gentle smile. Together, they had shifted the course of the empire, not with threats, not with weapons, but with honesty, courage, and unwavering love. The dawn was coming. The empire was beginning to bend, not broken, but open. And somewhere inside felt the tiny life inside her stir, a reminder that the future was no longer dictated solely by law, but by the courage to embrace hope. The turning had begun. The morning sun rose slowly over the capital, casting long golden beams across the palace spires. The air was crisp, and the city was quiet, yet beneath that calm, something extraordinary had begun. The people of the empire, who had spent generations in fear of change, now felt hope ripple through their hearts like a warm tide. Inside the palace, stood on the balcony of the medical wing, her silver cloak glinting in the sunlight. She had been through confinement, judgment, and endless whispers of doubt. Yet now, as she looked over the city, her eyes were filled with a quiet, unshakable strength. Beside her, Walker stood with calm determination, the man who had crossed the stars to stand by her side, the man who had shown her that courage could outweigh fear. The Imperial Council gathered in the Grand Chamber one last time. The murmurs of citizens had reached every corner of the palace, and even the council members could no longer ignore the wave of support for the princess and her child. The High Lord cleared his throat, his eyes betraying a mixture of doubt and realization. "Princess," he said, voice steady but softened, "the Empire has witnessed your courage and the courage of this human who stands beside you. We recognize that fear and tradition are not always the highest path. Therefore," held her breath. Every word carried the weight of generations, every pause a heartbeat of possibility. "You will retain your title. Your child will be recognized as a legal heir of the Empire, with full rights and protections. And humans shall be acknowledged as potential allies and citizens under the law, treated with the respect that truth and honor demand." The words echoed through the chamber, reverberating in his chest. Relief, joy, and a quiet pride mingled together. She pressed her hand to her abdomen, feeling the tiny life stirring within her, the child who had already begun to shape history before even being born. Outside, the citizens had gathered in the courtyards and streets, holding torches of blue flame, symbols of life, hope, and unity. Their voices rose in unison. "We support life. We support courage. We support the child." The sound carried through the city, soft at first, then growing into a powerful chorus that reached the walls of the palace and the ears of the council. Turn 2. His tired but gentle eyes met hers and he smiled, the kind of smile that carried promise, trust, and unwavering love. "We did it," she whispered, tears glimmering in her eyes. "No," replied softly, "you did it. You showed them what courage looks like." Together, they stepped onto the balcony, facing the cheering crowd, raised her hand, and silence fell for just a moment before the people erupted in joy. She saw mothers and fathers holding their children, young citizens clapping, soldiers lowering their weapons in quiet acknowledgement. The empire had seen its own reflection in the courage of a princess and a human. The High Lord watched from the chamber, his face a mixture of pride, regret, and hope. He had realized that the strength of the empire was not in fear, not in law, not in unchanging tradition, but in the compassion, courage, and love of its people. Inhaled deeply, feeling the wind play through her silver hair, feeling steady hand on her shoulder. She felt the life within her move, a tiny heartbeat that was already part of something greater than herself. The child would grow knowing that the world could change, that courage could challenge fear, that love could overcome judgment. The citizens' chants continued, a song of unity and hope carrying through the streets and the palace halls. His heart swelled. She had faced the council, the traditions, the fear, and the storm had not broken her. Together, she had begun a new chapter for the empire, a chapter where life, courage, and honesty were honored above all else. As the sun rose higher, bathing the city in golden light, felt something profound. The empire was no longer the same. It had been shaken, yes, but it had been awakened. A new dawn had arrived, not just in the sky, but in the hearts of every citizen who dared to hope. And somewhere inside her, the child moved again, a tiny spark of life that had already united worlds. Whispered to the future, to the child, to the people, and to the human who had crossed the stars for her, "We will build a world together, a world where courage matters more than fear." Squeezed her hand gently, "And we will face it together," he said. For the first time in the empire's long history, silence was no longer fear. It was awe, and the people realized something extraordinary. Life, courage, and love were stronger than any law, greater than any fear, and brighter than any star. The empire had changed, the princess had changed it, the human had changed it, and their child, not yet born, had already begun to write history. The dawn of a new era had begun.